something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Welcome home to Passionate Justice 80 Live on our smashing disruptive Starcom radio network. Real feelings, real personalities. Passionate Justice embedded in the Starcom radio network, anchored by brilliant talk show pioneer Ed Till. Weekdays, weekends, on fire. We all now are on fire, so connect with us at the Starcom Radio Network and on Facebook on Starcom Radio Network. And you can call in, mix it up at 855-438-8955. Starcom Real Feelings. As I say, yes, real personalities. Why? Because we broadcast real characters. I know you enjoy Passionate Justice on Starcom, so let me know how you hear me. Tell me at Starcom Radio Network's Facebook page. Like that page. So many of you have. I want more of you to. And let me know how you're hearing. Thank you all for your continuing and growing support. Reach out to me also on Twitter at JWOLF41387 for all Passionate Justice news releases, podcasts. I ask all of you follow that show on Twitter, JWOLF41387. Yet another great way to connect to the Starcom Radio Network. Now a new hour, personal notes, super guest writers. We're going to spur you on today and every day, every week. I challenge you to create a little more justice in our world. And yes, join our salon, the very best writers and readers site on the net, growing, hosted by Lori Wright of California, and it is free. Join now at www.oursalon.ning.com. I am author, activist Jonathan Wolfman, and the spark for these stories, as some of you know, Passionate Justice, a progressive memoir and essays, is available at Amazon, and I am so proud to say underwriting for Passionate Justice in 2015 comes from Bud Clayman and OC87 Productions, producers of OC87RecoveryDiaries.com and the feature-length film OC87, the obsessive-compulsive major depression bipolar Asperger's movie. Check out OC87RecoveryDiaries.com. So, we've said our last good night to our Neo Jack Kerouac, Don Draper writers, pointedly tipping hats to Mr. Kerouac as they place Don, in his own words, on the road. And as we leave Don, Mona Lisa smiling, looking out over the cliff at the retreat, having committed an act of real love, embracing a nondescript, despondent everyman, looking out from within his now pacific self, smiling genuinely, perhaps for the first time, a beatific smile of real contentment, the real thing, Coca-Cola, the account he gave up. Really? I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. Don Draper has found himself in himself and is with himself at peace. And of course, Don just may, as I've heard Ed say, return to Manhattan, right arguably the most powerful miracle advert in history. I'd like to teach in perfect harmony now that Don is himself the real thing. You know, last time I ripped the sanctimonious veil off the fraudulent face of the anti-choice movement's renewed move to punish women and their families for using contraception. So I'll share with you this. From the earliest days of Roe v. Wade, some 40 years back, and this, I swear, as the old doo-wop number says, this I swear is true. It happened to my oldest, closest pal, now San Francisco's industrial filmmaker, the very best one out there, Randy Field, and I call this, it's his story, I'm telling it, The Fetus from Milpitas. And as I share this, I want you to think of your oldest, closest pal. And when he or she was young and perhaps getting his or her first job. You know, from our infancy in the early 50s, Randy and I grew up together in a Philadelphia duplex. And you know what? It was close to where that train ran off the rails last week. Our moms were closest friends and remained so till each of them died from unusually rare and different debilitating cancers, mine in 73, Randy's sometime later. And it was said that our moms took us out together in our strollers 7, 8 times a day, and we grew as toddlers, tweens, and teens continually in one another's presence, and we enjoyed the same stuff, and I bet you did too if you were a child of the 50s. Mad Mag, Twilight Zone, American Bandstand, Victor Mature's awful Gladiator movies, but they were so great. Lenny Bruce, doo-wop, horrid and beautiful Phillies baseball, yeah, we loved that. Randy and I shared a bent for dark and absurd, socially subversive humor, and we loved torturing our moms. Our humor at its worst included terrible pranks for which we typically enjoyed miserable punishment separately and for damned eons. One prank found Randy's mom brushing her teeth with Brill cream. Little dabble, do ya? A far worse one involved an ISIS-like mass decapitation of dolls belonging to Randy's sister Denise. We were then, 6 or 7, stunned that no one else saw the humor. Randy was even more stunned when his answer to our mother's thunderous, "Why?" "But it's Denise." And that didn't result, and we were stunned in the instant maternal understanding we'd expected. Randy found himself having to work off the cost of new Chatty Cathys and Betsy Wetsies. I was barred from outdoor play for 100 years, and see, as we grew, we shared similar tastes and penchants as twins might, particularly for seeing bizarre humor in everything. And the worst we ever did after that wreckage was at 18 to return our draft cards to the well-intended, very nice people who had sent them to us. Our parents may have been silently proud, but vocally they were not pleased. After college, we both went to the Bay Area, where Randy stayed on in various neighborhoods and jobs, and today he's an industrial film producer, as I say, and lives with his family in Marin. Now, we've never lost touch, and we visit each other when we can, and maybe it's happened to you. In some ways, he and I are still wondrous friends. It's just great. And Randy made up his mind, you see, to stay in California in the year Roe v. Wade was decided, determined to do anything that would keep him there until he could use his Boston University film degree to earn a living. So at 22, what did he do? He took a scut job at a San Francisco hospital. So as low man, it fell to Randy to carry sawed-off and bagged limbs and extracted necrotic kidneys from operating rooms to storage. State law at that time, could now for all I know, required tagging and storing everything that became separated from a patient, including fetuses. So, one summer day, as on many days subsequent to Roe, organized protests came to hospitals where abortions were known to take place. At Randy's workplace, that day's protest started just after noon, and by 3, swelled to, maybe several hundred people, mostly women carrying signs such as Milpitas Moms for Life, and a dozen or so pastors. By 2:30, the TV people were taping and interviewing, though Randy sure as hell didn't know it, and that's when his supervisor told them they were out of the nondescript jars typically used for fetus storage, handing him a tray of what looked for all the world like relabeled and sterilized Gerber jars, 'cause they were. He told Randy to cross campus and check into refrigeration, perhaps dozen fetuses. To that, he'd have to, to get there, he'd have to cross an open quad. That's right, the demonstration site. So as Randy made his way across the quad, and I want you to picture this, as he made his way across the quad, demonstrators rushed up to ask his opinion about the recent court decision. It would have been quite a coup for them to get a supportive soundbite from a hospital employee. When they saw that Randy carried a tray of what appeared to be baby food jars, they gushed and swooned, called over a cameraman. So, of course, before Randy knew what was happening, a microphone was in his face, and a man was asking what he thought of the demonstrators and Roe v. Wade. An enthusiastic woman pointed to the jars as evidence of Randy's obvious goodwill toward the cause. The TV man asked Randy, "What do you have there, son?" Randy didn't skip a beat. "We're making a spaghetti western here, sir," he said. He smiled into the camera. "The fetus from Milpitas. Bless the lad, my oldest and still dearest friend Randy. Well, he was pounding pavement by evening." Now, switching it up, excerpts, Daily Cost analyst, who I think is really very good, Chauncey DeVega, his take on civil violence. And I'm calling this, although he doesn't, castrating memory and message. The killing of Freddie Gray is the proximate cause of Baltimore's riot. We know the deeper causes of society where it's supposed to be a meritocracy broken by the color line and class inequality. We may have a black man who happens to be president, racial equality, justice, and the radically democratic transformative possibilities Obama symbolized 7 years ago. They have not been translated into substantive improvements in the life chances for people of color more generally, or the poor, white and black in particular. And there's a ritual that accompanies these moments of protest and the wholly predictable urban unrest that follows the repeated killings of unarmed people by police. The high priests of public opinion take to the radio and the internet, summon the memory of Dr. King to condemn black folks rioting, for the latter are violating the sacred covenant of nonviolence that King is one of America's greatest leaders and supposedly died for. They mutter some basic understanding of the dream, spittle, punctuating a phrase about the civil rights movement as they shake their heads in consternation at the violent protests in Baltimore and elsewhere. Civil religion's futile acts of conjuring, futile, trying to channel a weak and unidimensional, castrated memory of a man reduced to selling fast food in February, making into an onerous statue at Washington's Mall and reduced to a paragraph ripped from a towering speech. If the legacy of the real King, his radical politics, vision, challenging words, deeds for America, an America sick with white supremacy, class inequality, warmongering, hatred for the poor, if that were properly challenged, it would deafen the chattering classes and broad swaths of the American public. Do not summon Dr. King if you don't know him. Dr. King has been canonized as an American saint, but you don't really remember, do you? At the time of his assassination, King was one of America's most despised public figures. He was not canonized. He was despised at the time of his murder. It's intellectually and morally lazy for people to breathe some section misappropriated from I've a Dream without considering seriously King's analysis of systemic power and inequality. embodied by his observation that a riot is the language of the unheard. He said this: riots don't develop out of thin air. Certain conditions continue to exist in our society, which must be condemned as vigorously as we condemn riots. For in the final analysis, a riot is the language of the unheard. And what is that? What is it that America's failed to hear? It's failed to hear that the plight of the poor has worsened. It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not been met. And it has failed to hear that large segments of white society, too, are more concerned about tranquility and the status quo rather than about justice, equality, humanity. Our nation's summers of riots are caused by our winters of delay. As long as America postpones justice, we stand in the position of having these recurrences of violence and riots over and over again. Social justice and progress are the absolute guarantors of riot prevention. So I ask you, listeners, I ask you, could King have been more right? Could he have been more right? If you persist in channeling King in these conversations about rioting, do it with care, especially now when conservatism and racism are fused together by the white right in the form of a Republican Party that is the United States' leading white supremacist organization. And let me here remind you that I've shared Langston Hughes' 51 warning, 1951, that justice delayed inevitably explodes. And I want to recommend to you the cover story of last Sunday's New York Times Magazine by J. Caspian Kang, simply called Our Demand. Our demand is simple. Stop killing us. Now, some poetry on passionate justice, because poetry, you know what poetry does? You know what poetry does? It tells stories, and it makes us human. Here's some powerful poetry from my writing colleague, New York City's Donna Snyder. This one's called The Sunday News. From the Associated Press, dolphins found shot, slashed, stabbed, and missing jaws. Mutilations and other injuries recorded in recent months. One found dead near Gaultier had a hole made by a 9mm bullet. Scientists who study marine mammals report 4 recent strandings, and on a recent Friday, another dolphin dead on Deer Island, a piece of his jaw removed. This just in, Nietzsche was right about God, and I am left alone in an incomprehensible world. Sentient creatures who might have the answer I seek die bleeding peace into a dirtied ocean, its waters fouled with despair that cannot be scrubbed clean. Dateline Damascus, children and journalists mutilated and killed by bombs blown into the meaningless abyss of a zero-sum game. They failed to learn the rules of play. In other news, people shot, slashed, stabbed, an endless litany of horror born of greed for capital or power. Next up, commentary. Nothingness lurks behind images and words. And dig this one from Donna. The tears of God fall brittle upon the fat of my cheeks as from a frozen deity, stripped of omniscience, denuded of omnipotence, omnipresent no more, an arrowless quiver, the body unflung at its mark, and I wait for the somethingness born of the limbs of the mother of all gods, she whose breast will protect me, she who will take me into her brown arms and cover me with a blanket of green, floating in a nearby endless blue, spinning through the infinite dark And now, last from Donna Snyder, Dead Hands. The dead reach out across the desert, burned like bricks by the enemy sun. Beyond the corpses, a litter of bottles emptied of life makes a trail to the border with its gaudy signs. Down the highway, a panel truck hides its contraband behind a locked door. Inside, the odor of bodies warns the night sky to open its arms to death's bounty. The desert stretches a merciless sea of boiled blood, waiting for the coming sun. Only the desperate believe the lies of the coyote. Coyote tricked the holy ones out of their fire and gave it to the people along with this scorched earth. Somewhere the names of workers are written like beads between fingers. Somewhere fields still and quiet wait for dead hands to harvest poisoned fruit. These poems by Donna Snyder of New York were originally published in Poemas ante el Catafalco from Chimborazo Press, New York. Now, did you hear about this? Writer Eric Dolan, in a piece called Put On Your Raping Shoes and Find This Bitch, Abby Martin is the latest target of crazed Chris Kyle sycophants. We're told that fans of American sniper Chris Kyle have threatened to rape and kill former RT America news anchor Abby Martin for criticizing the deceased Navy SEAL and creating a t-shirt they find offensive. Some psychotic Chris Kyle fan just doxed me, she says, and my family's personal information on a bunch of sniper forums. If anything happens to me or them, you know who to blame. These are the real fucking terrorists. That's what she wrote on her Facebook page. And what was her crime? What was her crime? As Ms. Martin described American Sniper, you see, as propaganda sanitizing a psycho. That was her crime. And while the legions of American psychos didn't love that, it was her t-shirt that set off a campaign of vicious, visceral harassment. Users of Twitter and Facebook have called for her rape and beheading. Hello, ISIS. See why? You see why you can so easily recruit our worst and dumbest? These guys online threatened to murder her, bombarded her with misogynistic insults. One called on American Sniper fans to put on our raping shoes. Find this bitch, fucking cunt. How dare you disgrace his name like that? Don't worry, I know where you live, thanks to your IP address. And don't worry, I'm a Marine, said one in a message shared by Ms. Martin. So you won't see me coming. I'm gonna cause you pain beyond your imagination. Tick-tock, tick-tock. And you know, other journalists, including Rania Khalek and Max Blumenthal, have been subjected to death threats too by these people, and online harassment for voicing their concerns about the film, any concern, telling that the hashtag Chris Kyle fans who say he died for our freedom are threatening to rape and kill for free speech. They're threatening and rape to kill for what? For free speech. So, look, Passionate Justice listeners, listen. Let's be real. The issue here isn't what you or anyone thinks of Chris Kyle or the film. The issue isn't even Chris Kyle or these commentators. See, look, any criticism of the film castrates that sad, sackless cadre of fake men who have no more to offer their families and our country, than their infantilism and vicious psychosis. You are now listening to Passionate Justice with Jonathan Wolfman on the Starcom Radio Network. Want to talk to me? 855-438-8955. Now, do you love counterintuitive? I dig it. I love counterintuitive, out-of-box social problem solving. So listen to this, dig this. It's a very cool thing. And a psychologist, this is his so-called crazy idea. It could end homelessness. How do we know? Listen to this. In HuffPo, a writer called Eleanor Goldberg praised a city that usually doesn't come in for applause. That's NOLA, New Orleans. New Orleans, what did it do? It recently ended chronic veteran homelessness. And San Francisco's gearing up to do the same thing. Utah currently has few chronic homeless people on the streets. And officials know each one by name. How? And the feds are set to put the kibosh on chronic homelessness maybe as early as 2017. Why? It's pretty much all thanks to a psychologist not even trained in how to address the homelessness population. This according to the Washington Post, WashPo. His name is Sam Tsemberis, on the faculty at Columbia University Medical Center. And what did he do? He's credited with heralding what really is a radical concept, and it's called housing first. Housing first. It's the model successful cities attribute to enabling them to end chronic homelessness. Not enough of us have tried it yet, but dig this. Listen to what they do. The approach supports giving people on the streets housing and then addressing their addiction, their unemployment, their mental health issues after they get housing. Now, I raised up this effort here on Passionate Justice on Starcom Radio months back because LA began to do it last summer. Madison, Wisconsin is doing it, and I raised that up too. And now New Orleans. People thought this was crazy, said Dr. Tsemberis. He also said that, you mean even when someone relapses and sells all the furniture you give them in their house to pay for what? Drugs? You don't kick them out? No, we don't. We don't kick them out. When Tsemberis first got involved, you see, with this homeless outreach way back in the 90s, he realized there was a need to do more than just force medication on the people in the streets, and he developed a task force to come up with a new paradigm. We've got to try new things, people. Providing a roof over the heads of people in need, and then offering the services that could help them kick their addictions and even land jobs. Way back in 92, Tsemberis put his theory to work when he launched Pathways to Housing, a nonprofit currently in New York, Washington, Philadelphia, and of all places, Vermont. One of my old homes. The organization provides housing and health services to people in need, but doesn't require clients to be sober or participate in treatment before getting the keys to a home. Numerous studies, you see, show that providing housing is key. And in fact, it's cost efficient for you and me, for taxpayers. One report last year found that it cost Central Florida over $31,000 annually to keep each homeless person in the shelter system, incarcerations, emergency room visits, so many other expenses. That was reported by the Orlando Sentinel and other papers. But see, providing a chronically homeless person with a residence and case managers would only rack up about a $10,000 tax bill. For example, Moore House, a Charlotte, North Carolina-based program, is an 85-room facility that also adheres to the Housing First model. It costs them about $14,000 to house an individual, and residents are required to contribute 30% of their incomes to rent. The rest is subsidized by whom? By private donations and public funding, yes, and the taxpayers. But after 2 years in the program, dig this, 81% of clients remained in permanent housing. That's amazing. 81%. And the city saved $2.5 million in medical bills alone. Stable housing is a foundation for recovery. Now you've got to find out if your city has a Housing First program. And if no, I want you to think about working with others and City Hall. Start one. This is simple, people. If we're trying to help, if we're really trying to solve problems, we try innovation. Is it all going to work? No, but we try innovation. If our goal is punishment, and punishment mainly or only, we mire ourselves in what forever just has not worked. I want you to be bold. Now, a poem from our Ohio friend, the Songbird. This is really different, and I want you to give this real third eye attention. This is called Macturnation. Sex with an armature is mechanically perfect. Every nuance of desire in programmed inertness. Preconceive what you'd like, tell it to act, and as if in a dream, the dream becomes your exact genderless renderings of sensation, so craved, overtakes the nuance of touch, of place, the surprise of another by touch, by aura, that releases the unexpected is now passé. To my horror, to be mechanized is to be realized, as if machination is real, but machinery only mocks life by bolts and clips. But sans feel sci-fi apocalyptics don't account the future as now. They live in the rapture of capturing the disallowed, dead to time, dead to sensation, only mechanical clips to emulate sensation. How about a machine to attach to your nerves? You could jerk and spin as if a lobotomy incurred. How would that be? Would it be more real than a glance, the spark of how another can make you feel? Who, what is all programmed input, output, enough. There are only two elements that cojoin all underneath the male and female harmonic. Fruits move, steams and heats. Woman, man, man, woman. So much debate, which is which, who is who. Superheroes enter, exaltations of power, but only fighting troubles they themselves imbue. So if there is no trouble, there is no need for strife. And for me, I love my skin and its receptors that inform my life. There are only two things in the world, in the whole of the world, that meeting of elements, male, female, boy, girl, each a necessary part of one magnificent whole. So I'll just leave the machines to those who've lost the essence of soul. Now I want to talk about another subject. You've watched professional wrestling. I think so many of us have. And you've watched professional religious persons on TV. You know that in the U.S., religious affiliation and beliefs decreasing in America, and has been even more dramatically for years in Europe, and that that's true despite the popularity of this Pope. So dig this. TV, wrestling, and religion are so alike. Have you ever thought about that? We know it's fake, and we don't care. We know it's fake, and we don't care. Last week, filmmaker Max Landis posted a wildly popular short on YouTube entitled Wrestling Isn't Wrestling. The idea is that what people think professional wrestling is, it's not. It's rich storytelling and epic, almost mythological, generally obscured by that constant question from baffled non-fans, you know it's all fake, right? You know it's all fake, right? Max Landis absolutely loves professional wrestling. He says that since he first laid eyes on the masked Mr. Wrestling 2 on Georgia Championship Wrestling back in the 70s, he became a dyed-in-the-wool fan of the unique blend of physicality and scripted performance known as sports entertainment, from the cultural impact of Hulkmania in the 80s through the downturn of the industry in the mid-90s to the explosion of popularity of WWF versus WCW Monday Night Wars. He said he excitedly ordered the pay-per-views, attended the life events and fantasy book storylines, as any self-respecting fan should. But despite whatever you might think about pro wrestling, it possesses undeniable cultural currency. In the past several weeks alone, World Wrestling Entertainment, that's WWE, that its flagship television show, Monday Night Raw, has welcomed a series of celebrities, including Jon Stewart from The Daily Show. It is becoming mainstream, and so here it is. Professional wrestling, much like organized religion, operates how? It operates within its own system of internal logic and rules. See, to the uninitiated, the inability of a wrestler to prevent himself from bouncing off the ropes or a suplex, inflicting damage only on an opponent despite both bodies slamming into the mat, might appear as strange as, say, walking in on the ceremony of Holy Communion with no understanding of the purpose or meaning behind the ritual. The bizarre internal logic of the sport is incidental to fans because ultimately wrestling isn't about wrestling like religion isn't about God. It's about constructing mythology and meaning. We know it's fake and we don't care. We know it's fake and we just don't care. When you tell the believer in wrestling or religion, you know it's fake, right? You just miss the point. And then there are those who do think it's real, and who can't separate fantasy from reality. They believe that The Undertaker is an actual undead wizard who conjures lightning, like those faithful who agree that God wants Creflo Dollar to have a $65 million jet plane. A week doesn't pass when we don't see a viral Facebook post regarding a seriously ill kid who's sure to die from cancer unless thousands of people pray for healing. I mean, can you just imagine God up there watching the prayer ticker anxiously while muttering, "Oh, come on, folks, just 10,000 more prayers and I can save that little girl." As they always spew, faith may move mountains, but prayer moves God. This view of prayer, you know what? This view of prayer is pretty twisted. Gives God credit for rain, no blame for the drought. I mean, ever see a high school football team take that collective knee, thank Jesus when the cross-county rival beats hell out of them? No. Prayer warriors? Well, they just didn't pray enough. Look, a creator swayed by every request from the created is just not worthy of your worship. I mean, is your God what? Some cosmic gumball machine dispensing treats when prayerful coins are inserted into that magic slot? So yeah, wrestling isn't wrestling. It's a meaning machine. Look, Jesus' admonition to go into your room, shut the door, pray to your Father who's in secret, that's a stone-cold Steve Austin middle finger to misguided social media prayer-a-thons that seek viral likes on Facebook, hoping to manipulate the universe. Manipulate the universe? You know, I think that's a lot about what Ed Till talks about. I do. About everybody in certain modern generations thinking that wishing can make it so. It's like the lousy bowler's absurd contorted body English prayer. It's useless because, man, you're in the gutter. Now, I want to share a piece. I want to share a piece from a writer's writer. A guy I know, and I've met this writer. His name is Greg Correll. He is an upstate New York writer whose social commentary is often deeply personal, poetic, and poignant. Greg wrote this for a slam event years ago, the TM Idol Story Slam, and he calls this piece Love Heals. And as I share this with you people, I want you to see if it can in any way touch parts of you, but parts of your experience as well, or experience of people you know. Greg tells us in Love Heals, when I was 21, my first wife, Mirren, dropped off our daughter and said, I can't do this, I'm going crazy. And she couldn't, and she did. Molly was not yet 2. Mirren gave me a bag of tiny clothes, Nooks, Babas, and Dollies, another of cloth diapers. I'd taken care of Molly every other weekend since the separation, so I had provisional things, but I would scramble to find a real crib, a dresser, a proper changing surface. She checked herself into a facility that night, as she would again and again for 20 years. Up and down each year, she spent a lot of time in hospitals before taking her own life. About 6 weeks in as a single parent, I was failing with my foam core, a senior art project. I couldn't curse. Molly was sleeping 10 feet away. Crept outside, found a place near the window so I could hear her if she woke, and called out. I didn't know what I was doing. I pushed my face into the dark grass and I moaned. Couldn't abandon her. I wanted to. God forgive me, I wanted to. In fact, I thought constantly, who can I take her to? Who would relieve me of this? If I'd had family nearby, I don't know. None of them were a better choice than me, but I chewed it over a lot that night. Oh, that night I howled, afraid to wake the neighbors. With each rasping intake, I inhaled dirt and debris. I finally reached that skin of pins place. I reached that skin of pins place, the skeletal feeling of empty, and sat up, went back outside, then in, turned out the light, rocked on the edge of my mattress and waited for 5 a.m., stared at my unfinished project. On that night, in that hour before dawn, my marrow filled with steel, my limbs shook, my muscles changed as boyish, awkward excess was replaced with a man's taut reserve. This perplexes me still. Believers have ready explanations. I don't. What changed in me was organic. It was Nana. She raised my mother alone during the Depression. Her grace, her humble work, her commitment to self-learning was steady. Her love for me shimmered that night in the cobalt blue of our small room not long after Mirren came to us. I was still in love with her. She was having a psychotic episode. Her pinpoint pupils' odd affect and frozen stance put me on alert the moment I opened the door, so I stepped out. I told her she could not take Molly for the day. She couldn't come in, my hand behind me. I closed the door. She was in another state, and my duty was to my baby. Mirren and I teetered in that tick-tock hall. Insanity came off her like sunburn, like liquor and lotion and vomit from her pores. I didn't do flight or fight. I stood my ground. I was ready for something, but I was afraid, and I don't hide it from her. Love was what I switched on, a beacon on high rocks, and the only kind I had to give at that exact moment was to tremble before her. It couldn't hurt, I remember hoping. She backed away with a murderous gratitude. And I walked slowly down the stairs. I followed, not pursuing, but definitive, our stitched-up smiles fixed upon each other. A walk of 1,000 shifting hesitations. She muttered non sequiturs and fighting words as she left from the window. I watched her sit motionless in her car for over an hour. She told me years later she was glad I had turned her away. She had her dead cop's father loaded .38 in her bag, a rifle and ammo in her car. When she told me this, she grinned. In her kaleidoscope existential mythology, she put love of Molly first. She chose life, and I love her still for her ragged strength. You know, one reason, Passionate Justice listeners on Starcom, one reason I chose to share this with you, because Ed Till has been talking all week about a generation that finds it so difficult to stand firm. This is a story, in a man's own words, despite having to confront a lover, a wife, a crazy person, but he knew what his responsibility was. This is such a beautiful piece, Greg. Thank you so much. Now, wrapping today, you know, with radical Islam and the damned, enervating, monotonous Barnum Bailey news cycle, I present you with a riff I punched out in 5 or so minutes when some years ago CNN's John King, 2 weeks after Osama bin Sunken was delivered to the bottom of the Aegean, I realized that Al-Qaeda have to hire a new man to try to live up to the challenges of the 9th century, and as I'm always here to help, I sent Al-Qaeda this: my Al-Qaeda Emergency New Leadership Qualifying Questionnaire, May 2011. Al-Qaeda announces that its search for a new leader is underway. Fill this out in disappearing ink. Your name, your career's name, your disaffected preteen jihad in training JIT name, your Facebook name, your my jihad name. Now check all that apply. I can build a Kalashnikov from sand. I can wield the scimitar of the just martyr. If selected, I will give up my Comcast account, my Sports Illustrated subscription, Chinese takeout. I dislike the Renaissance, yes or no? Yes or no, I very much disdain modernism. Yes or no, I simply cannot abide postmodernism. Yes or no, Jews like all that. I dislike Jews immensely, intensely. I think the Indiana Jones scene where he offs the brother in the robe who's wielding a scimitar is, now check all that apply, unfair, very unfair. A grossly unfair byproduct of American arrogance. Hollywood, controlled by Jews. So is Bollywood. It was plagiarized from an Israeli training video. I used to like my cricket phone, but now I hate what the data package includes. I think the Temptations were better than the Four Tops, yes or no? You know I'm a very... Now, check this if it's true. I am a deeply spiritual killer who refuses to do the mashed potato or the Watusi because, check all that apply, the singers were female girls. The records were produced in New York. Is there a song in your heart? Yes. Now, I most identify with these three songs. Which one? Bet you're wondering how I knew of your plans to make me blue with some other guy you knew before. Between the two of us guys, you know I love you more. I don't like you, but I love you. Seems that I'm always thinking of you. Oh, you treat me badly. I love you madly. You really got a hold on me. The night we met, I knew I needed you so. And if I had the chance, I knew I'd never let you go. So won't you say you love me? I'll make Jihad so proud of me. Yes or no? I dislike nosy neighbors with multiple antennae. I think Pakistani garrison towns aren't all that. I think Matlock's jihad name when he was in the Atlanta cell should remain among the pure and never be spoken aloud, Opie. I have no fear of 24 reruns, Penelope Garcia and the Criminal Minds Profiler, or Abby from the NCIS, or that nerd guy she works with? Yes or no? And finally, can you see Ramallah from your house? Yes, I can. So, think on your stories, people. And I want you to follow this program on Twitter at jwolf41387. You have so much more. You have passionate justice embedded in the full range of diverse, poignant, compelling programming at Starcom Radio Network. Real feelings, real personalities. We broadcast real characters all the while. Keep trying to live as if justice matters, as if what you and your kids do matter. Be creative, courageous, take your place on that great Mandela next to Bud Clayman, Songbird, Donna Snyder, Greg Carell, right next to me, because this is our brief moment of time. Our friend Phil Oakes, that poor tortured man, he said, I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. He was so very right. Go repair this crazy place. You can, because I promise when you act on justice's behalf, it does pay back. And it will most definitely make you happy. For our 81st show at 3 p.m. next week, U.S. Eastern on Starcom. And right now, bookmark StarcomRadioNetwork.com and follow the show on Twitter at jwolf41387, because there and everywhere it is passionate justice.